A black student walks into a luxurious restaurant in his school uniform, but before he can sit down, a female waitress approaches him with a scrutinizing look, her voice dripping with disdain. "Kid, are you sure you have enough money to eat here?" Her cold words are loud enough for some nearby guests to overhear, drawing curious glances filled with skepticism as they eye the boy. What happens next? Not only leaves everyone in the restaurant speechless, but also reveals a truth that changes everything. Lumiere. Restaurant is a symbol of luxury and sophistication. It's not just a place to enjoy fine dining, but a hotspot for the elite, where businessmen, movie stars, and the wealthy gather inside. The warm glow from massive crystal chandeliers casts a luxurious halo over the space. The velvet-upholstered chairs, pristine white tablecloths, and polished silver cutlery reflect the shimmering light from the flickering candles. Every little detail in the restaurant is meticulously arranged, creating a perfect atmosphere for the wealthy to feel like they truly belong. The staff move gracefully and professionally, wearing custom-designed uniforms, their hair neatly styled and their bright but somewhat fake smiles. They're trained to treat customers like royalty, but their cold assessing gazes let you know who belongs and who doesn't. The restaurant's glass door slowly opens, and a gust of cold air sweeps into the warm space. Among the guests in expensive suits and luxurious silk dresses, a boy walks in, small and out of place, like a blot of ink on a blank sheet of paper. Nathan Carer, 14 years old, with a slender frame, intelligent eyes, and a strangely calm expression on his face. He doesn't look like a regular at Lumiere. He's still wearing his school uniform after class, and a pair of old worn-out sneakers with some dried mud stains. He lacks the air of someone who could easily spend hundreds of dollars on a meal. Here he pauses for a moment at the entrance, takes a deep breath, and walks toward the reception desk, where a female waitress stands waiting. No one in the restaurant pays attention to him, except Ashley Miller, one of Lumiere's longtime staff members. She watches the boy with a scrutinizing gaze, her lips curling into a slight smirk as if she's just seen something out of place. Ashley has a habit: she categorizes customers the moment they walk in. With a quick glance, she can tell who has money, who shouldn't be here, who deserves excellent service, and who is just wasting her time. And by her unspoken standards, this boy is completely out of place. Ashley squints her eyes, scanning from Nathan's slightly curly hair down to his scuffed sneakers. A thought quickly crosses her mind. A lost kid, some country bumpkin wandered in here out of curiosity. Or maybe a homeless boy looking for food. No matter what the answer is, it's clear that this boy does not belong here. Nathan took a few more steps, approaching the reception desk, where Ashley Miller stood upright, AR arms crossed over her chest, her gaze openly scrutinizing. The click of her high heels echoed softly on the polished marble floor, an unconscious habit. Whenever she had to greet guests she deemed unworthy of entering the doors of Lumiere, the boy moved calmly with no rush. Yet each of his steps seemed like a dark ink stain creeping into the perfect picture Ashley always took pride in about this place. Her sharp eyes quickly scanned his oversized gray hoodie, the slight fraying at the cuffs, the faded unbranded jeans, and the well-worn sneakers. These signs spoke volumes without needing to ask anything further. Ashley reached her own conclusion. A penniless kid was walking into a place meant for the elite. She gave a slight smirk, a sarcastic smile appearing on her face that usually remained professional in front of wealthy clients. She had an unwritten rule, a belief ingrained in her mind. People who didn't look wealthy didn't deserve to be treated decently. And this boy in her eyes, didn't even seem like a real customer. Nathan slowly stopped in front of the desk, his face calm but his eyes clear. He didn't seem to notice the blatant disdain on the receptionist's face politely. He spoke in a soft voice. "Hello, I'd like to make a reservation." Ashley immediately sneered, her laugh small, but enough to show her attitude. She tilted her head, resting her hand lightly on the desk, her voice dragging mockingly. "Kid, you sure you've got enough money to eat here?" The question didn't mask its contempt. This wasn't a fast food joint, nor a place where you could order a burger and leave with a small bill. Lumiere was one of the most luxurious restaurants in Beverly Hills, where a meal could cost as much as a month's salary for an ordinary worker. A meal here could easily run into the thousands, and only the upper class treated that as normal. Ashley was certain this boy didn't belong in that world. However, contrary to her expectations, Nathan didn't appear upset or embarrassed. He didn't blush from the mockery, didn't bow his head in shame, nor did he walk away as some people often did when rejected. Instead, he simply nodded gently, his voice steady. "Yes, I'd like to dine here tonight." Ashley narrowed her eyes. Was the kid joking with her, or did he genuinely not understand what was happening anyway? She wasn't about to serve a customer she deemed unworthy. She turned away, not even bothering to check the reservation list. Her tone indifferent, yet laden with insinuation. "We only accept guests with reservations and looking at you. I'm sure you don't have one." Nathan's expression didn't change. He knew exactly what she was doing. He also knew he had every right to step into this restaurant. But instead of arguing, he calmly replied, "Could you double-check? Please, Ashley." Bit her lip, trying to hide a hint of frustration as she saw the boy remain unfazed by her attitude. She turned, pretending to tap lightly on the keyboard of the computer screen, as if checking the reservation list. Every movement was deliberate, slowed down, as though she were genuinely trying to find something she knew didn't exist. A few seconds later, she sighed theatrically, shaking her head in mock regret. "Oh, sorry, no reservation under your name." Her smile was challenging her eyes, gleaming with satisfaction, thinking she had finally pushed the boy to a dead end. She wanted to see him flustered, to see him lose his confidence, to make him understand. He didn't belong here, but what she didn't expect was Nathan's reaction. The boy didn't seem surprised or disappointed. He simply looked at her with calm eyes, as though her words didn't affect him in the slightest. Nathan gently tilted his head. His lips slightly pursed, as if thinking about something, and then exhaled softly. "Oh, must be a mix-up." Ashley frowned. This wasn't the response she had anticipated. No disappointment, no confusion, no sign that the boy was about to leave. A sense of discomfort crept in her, but she maintained her indifferent smile. "Too bad. But Lumiere is very busy tonight. If you don't have a reservation, you might want to try somewhere more suitable for you." Her final words were a disguised dismissal, a way of telling the boy he didn't belong here. But once again, Nathan didn't leave. He looked at her, his dark eyes calm but deep, and said flatly, "So if I want to make a reservation now, can I?" Ashley frowned. Genuinely annoyed, this kid wasn't as easy to push away as she thought. No awkwardness. No fear. His attitude made her feel like she was the one being challenged, not him. Ashley tightened her fingers slightly, but still kept her fake smile. "Sorry, but we don't accept walk-in reservations. It's the policy." Nathan nodded slightly, as if he had anticipated her response. He glanced at an empty table nearby and then looked back at her. "What about those empty tables? Who reserved them?" Ashley froze for a moment. This boy really knew how to ask the right questions. Ashley stood still. For a moment, her eyes still fixed on the boy in front of her, as if weighing something in her mind. The true guests of Lumiere were always the ones she wished to serve. Though she could greet with her most radiant smile, courteous to perfection. But this boy number, he did not belong here. He did not deserve her enthusiasm, which was reserved only for customers of a certain caliber. She glanced at a row of empty tables in the middle of the restaurant where the crystal chandelier cast a dazzling light reflecting off the polished silverware. These prime spots thoughts weren't for someone who looked like they had just stepped out of a shabby working-class neighborhood. Although there were no rules mandating a dress code, Ashley had always set an invisible boundary. Those who didn't exude wealth shouldn't be in the center of Lumiere. With a false smile, she turned on her heel and walked away without a word, making it clear that Nathan had to follow her. Steps were firm, the click of her high heels echoing rhythmically on the marble floor as she led the boy past the rows of candlelit tables and straight to the back of the restaurant. Without a single glance back, she didn't care whether he felt uncomfortable or not. As they moved deeper into the restaurant, the lights grew dimmer and the lively chatter of the guests was replaced by the clattering sounds of the kitchen, the clinking of pots and pans, and the brief instructions of the chef coming from behind. Ashley slowed down as they reached the farthest section of the restaurant, where she usually seated guests she considered unimportant. A small table sat against the wall near the door to the kitchen, where servers often passed through with trays of steaming food. This area lacked the luxury of the main sections. No sparkling candles, no soft background music. Just a dim corner lit by yellowish lights with the hum of a dishwasher running in the distance. She stopped placing the menu down sharply on the table, letting it make a deliberate thud. A smile with hidden meaning appeared on her face as she looked at Nathan with amusement, as if she had just completed a little game whose rules only she knew. "You'll feel more comfortable here," she said sweetly in a tone that was all too fake. Nathan glanced briefly at the table before looking back at Ashley. There was no sign of displeasure, no indication that he felt insulted by her treatment. He simply nodded slightly, his voice gentle. Thank you. Ashley narrowed her eyes slightly, a flicker of disappointment. Crossing her face, she had expected a different reaction. Perhaps confusion, a bit of discomfort, maybe even some resistance. But this boy simply accepted it the way he acted. So calm, made it impossible to tell what he was thinking. That irked her, more than any complaint from a customer. Not far from them, a middle-aged couple was enjoying their dinner in the cozy glow of the soft yellow lights. The woman gently set her glass of wine down her eyes, briefly scanning Ashley and Nathan. "Did you see that?" she whispered, leaning toward the man across from her. "What did she just do to that boy?" The man, a gentleman with neatly groomed gray hair, looked up to observe. He had noted the moment Nathan walked in, seeing the clear disdain on Ashley's face. From the very first seconds, something was wrong at another table near the window. Henry Thompson, an older man, in a well-tailored suit, with a composed demeanor, had also witnessed the entire exchange. He had been a regular at Lumiere for many years, and was no stranger to Ashley's behavior. Henry wasn't one to interfere in other people's business, but what he had just witnessed made it impossible for him to remain indifferent. He hadn't only seen how Ashley treated the boy, he had also noticed the smug look on her face as she turned away, a look of arrogance as though she had won a game that only she was playing. He took a sip of his wine, but his eyes remained on Nathan. The boy still sat quietly, not complaining, showing no sign of anger, just slowly opening the menu and beginning to scan the offerings. That child is no ordinary one. Henry thought to himself, the boy didn't seem like someone trying to break into a strange world. Instead, he acted as if he had every right to be here, even though he had been placed in the worst seat in the restaurant. Henry looked around, waiting to see if anyone would speak out against the injustice taking place. But as always, no one wanted to intervene. He sighed softly, shaking his head slowly. Perhaps this time I'll be the one to speak up. The dim light from the restaurant's secluded corner cast over the small table where Nathan sat calmly, slowly flipping through the menu with an almost baffling slowness. The sound of cook from the kitchen blended with the chatter from the more luxurious section where wealthy guests were enjoying their dinner in the perfect atmosphere of Lumiere. Nathan didn't care about the position he was assigned, nor did he mind the disdainful glances Ashley gave him whenever she passed by his table after deliberately dragging out the time to serve the more deserving customers. Ashley finally returned to Nathan's table with her order pad in hand. She didn't try to hide the contempt on her face from her experience. Guests seated in the corners usually ordered only a glass of water, or at most the cheapest dish to avoid being stared at. And this boy surely wouldn't be an exception. So, have you decided on your order? Ashley's voice rang out, drawn out, with a hint of boredom, as if she was wasting her time on a pointless task. Nathan folded the menu, looked up and pointed to a dish on the first page. His response caused Ashley's smile to stiffen. I'll have the filet de Rossini. Thank you. Ashley blinked for a moment, thinking she had misheard filet de Rossini, one of the most expensive dishes on the menu, priced at $350 per serving, a piece of top-tier beef paired with rich, Vagra, expensive black truffle sauce, served in the most refined style. This was the kind of dish wealthy businessmen usually ordered. Not some scruffy kid placed in the corner of the restaurant. She raised an eyebrow, the corners of her mouth curling into a smile that was both mocking and somewhat pleased. Do you know this dish costs $350? Nathan remained calm, his eyes sparkling faintly under the soft golden light. He wasn't surprised, embarrassed, or awkward, as Ashley had hoped. Yes, sounds delicious. Ashley was momentarily stunned. His unnervingly calm demeanor made her feel as though she was the one being tested. He didn't seem like a poor kid trying to act rich, but neither did he seem like a wealthy person playing a game of anonymity. He was too hard to read, and that irritated her. But if he thought that ordering an expensive dish would make her respect him, he was sorely mistaken. Ashley slowly leaned down a little as if to lower her voice and create an air of mystery, but in reality she wanted to emphasize each word. Then don't forget the tip. At least 20%. All right? She looked straight into Nathan's eyes, hoping to see him start to worry. She wanted to witness a moment of panic, an awkward expression when he realized that not only was the dish expensive, but the bill that came with it was something he hadn't anticipated. But Nathan didn't react the way she expected. He simply nodded softly, as though her words had nothing to do with him. All right. Ashley bit her lip, a growing discomfort settling in. Since when could a kid make her feel this irritated? She began to feel something was off. Who was this kid? Why wasn't he flustered by anything she threw at him? If he truly had no money, he would have been flustered the moment she mentioned the price. But if he were rich, why was he dressed like that? Ashley took a deep breath, not wanting to lose in this game. If the boy thought he could come here and act like a VIP customer, she would make this experience as uncomfortable as possible for him. She decisively clicked her pen, wrote the order into the pad with more force than necessary, and slammed it shut with a snap. "Very well. You seem confident now. Just sit here and wait with that." She turned and walked away without asking anything else, leaving Nathan alone in the dark corner of the restaurant. But from afar, a sharp pair of eyes was watching the whole scene. Henry Thompson, a long-time regular, gently set his glass of wine down. His expression was somber, but his eyes were thoughtful. He couldn't hear the entire conversation, but Ashley's expression said it all: the mockery, the disdain, and now the subtle anger as she walked away. Something wasn't right. Henry leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. His gaze never leaving the boy sitting alone. Nathan wasn't flustered or worried, not like someone who had just been publicly humiliated. He remained calm, his eyes forward quietly, like someone who had long been accustomed to this kind of injustice. This boy was no ordinary person. Henry took a slow breath, lifted his glass, and muttered to himself, "Let's see how far this goes." Ashley walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray full of glasses of wine, her eyes quickly glancing over to the corner where Nathan was sitting. She pursed her lips slightly, then casually turned and walked in the opposite direction, heading straight towards the VIP tables at the center of the restaurant. Instead of immediately taking Nathan's order to the kitchen, Ashley decided to delay it intentionally. She stopped at the table of a middle-aged businessman, smiling brightly as if he were the only customer at Lumiere. She leaned forward, her voice softer than usual. "Mr. Johnson, I hope your dinner is still going perfectly." The man smiled and nodded in satisfaction. Ashley knew how to win over people like him. She chuckled, exchanged a few words, and quickly left, but still made no move to head back to the kitchen with Nathan's order. She wasn't in a hurry. That boy didn't deserve to be served like a real customer if he was foolish enough to sit there and wait. Then let him wait. Ashley continued to circle the restaurant, her high heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. She intentionally passed by Nathan's table several times, but never stopped, never looked down at him. Nathan remained sitting there, motionless as a statue, observing everything around him but showing no signs of frustration or impatience. He didn't tap his fingers on the table, didn't roll his eyes like someone who was restless. His calmness bothered Ashley even more than anger would have. Meanwhile, some customers in the restaurant started to notice the middle-aged couple seated nearby had witnessed the entire situation since Nathan first walked in. The woman frowned and turned to her husband. "Did you see that the boy has been waiting for a while, but she keeps ignoring him, like he doesn't even exist?" The man, who had been focused on his meal, now began to notice something was off. "Ashley is always like that," he said, his voice tinged with dissatisfaction. "She only serves those she thinks are worthy." It wasn't just them. Many other customers began to pay attention. Some exchanged confused glances, while others discreetly observed Nathan. However, no one spoke. Lumiere wasn't the type of place where people liked to intervene in others' business. Even though they knew what was happening, most chose to remain silent. But there was one person who didn't stay quiet. Henry Thompson set his glass of wine down on the table and took a slow breath. He wasn't the type to get involved in other people's business, but today something urged him to act. He looked at Nathan. The boy didn't seem embarrassed, didn't seem angry, didn't show the slightest dissatisfaction. He just sat there calm as if nothing happening around him affected him. But that was exactly what bothered Henry the most. No child should ever be so familiar with injustice like this. Henry stood up gently, adjusted his suit, and slowly walked toward Nathan's table. No one in the restaurant stopped him. Some people glanced at him curiously, wondering what he was going to do. But Henry didn't care. He approached Nathan's table, smiling warmly, with no hint of insincerity or pity. "You're very calm," he said in a deep, warm voice. "Not everyone can be as patient as you, Nathan." Looked up at the older man before him, with neither surprise nor caution. He nodded slightly, his eyes lighting up with respect. "Thank you, Sir Henry," studied Nathan for a moment, then raised an eyebrow as if pondering something. This boy was different. He could see in Nathan an uncommon tranquility. A type of patience, not because he didn't realize he was being treated unfairly, but because he had become accustomed to it. Henry didn't like that a child shouldn't be accustomed to being looked down upon. He sat down in the chair across from Nathan, a move that made those around them stare. In surprise, Ashley, who had just stepped out of the kitchen, paused. Her smile vanished instantly, and her eyes flashed with irritation when she saw Henry Thompson, one of Lumiere's longest-standing customers, sitting at the same table as that boy. For a moment, Henry and Ashley's gazes met. She knew he had SE everything. Henry took a sip of water, not breaking eye contact with Ashley, and smiled a smile that wasn't exactly friendly but carried an implicit reminder this game was about to change. Henry Thompson remained seated across from Nathan, his sharp eyes never leaving the boy's face. There was something special about him. An unbelievable calmness, as if he had grown accustomed to situations like this. This made Henry feel both curious and uneasy. Nathan wasn't the type to be clueless. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew that Ashley had intentionally mistreated him, that he had waited longer than usual, but he didn't show any signs of dissatisfaction. Why, as Henry pondered how to continue the conversation, the large door of Lumiere suddenly opened, bringing a cold draft from outside into the room. The hum of conversation in the restaurant quieted for a moment. A man walked in, Stephen Carter wearing a finely tailored black suit, the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist sparkling under the restaurant lights, and his polished Italian leather shoes reflecting the light from the marble floor. The man carried himself like someone in power every step, exuding confidence and authority without anyone announcing him. All the restaurant staff immediately recognized him. Stephen Carter, the owner of Lumiere, the restaurant manager. A middle-aged man in a well-fitted uniform practically rushed out from the kitchen to greet his boss. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know you were coming tonight. It's an honor to have you here." Ashley froze. She felt her whole body stiffen, her hand tightening around the service tray, nearly dropping it for a moment. She couldn't believe her eyes. Stephen Carter. What was he doing here tonight? Ashley took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. What had she done wrong? Nothing at all. She was just doing her job as usual. There was nothing to worry about, right? But when she looked back toward the corner of the restaurant where Henry Thompson was still seated across from Nathan, a chill ran down her spine. It couldn't be. She looked more closely at the boy. Suddenly, everything started to click together. The boy wasn't afraid of being mistreated. He never hesitated when talking about prices. He didn't react when placed in the worst seat in the restaurant. And now Stephen Carter, the owner, appeared unexpectedly a terrifying truth. Slowly formed in Ashley's mind. The boy wasn't just any customer. He was Stephen Carter's son. Ashley swallowed hard, her mind starting to panic if the boy was really the boss's son. Then she had just made the worst mistake of her career. She wanted to rush over to explain, to say she hadn't meant it. But she couldn't. Her feet felt frozen in place. Stephen Carter walked further into the restaurant, his sharp eyes scanning the luxurious surroundings. No one knew what he was thinking, but the atmosphere in Lumiere had changed. He saw Henry Thompson first, and just for a moment his gaze stopped on the boy sitting across from the elderly man. Nathan, just one word, not loud, not harsh, but enough for some nearby patrons to glance toward the corner of the restaurant. Henry slowly stood up, a half-smile appearing on his face. He wasn't surprised. "Good evening. Stephen, looks like tonight. We be quite interesting." Stephen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked straight toward Nathan's table. The restaurant suddenly fell silent. Ashley felt her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was the decisive moment. Nathan slowly stood up, his eyes meeting the tall man before him. He didn't seem surprised, nor did he appear worried. He simply smiled lightly. "Hello, Dad." A ripple of shock spread throughout the restaurant nearby. Guests couldn't hide the curiosity on their faces. Stephen stared at his son for a long moment before turning to Henry. "I think you've had an interesting conversation with my boy, Henry." Henry chuckled. Softly. "Your son is very special." Stephen Ashley felt sweat beginning to pour down her back. Stephen didn't look at her right away. He scanned the table, noticing the poor position Nathan had been assigned. The he looks from other staff members, and then his gaze finally rested on Ashley's pale face. Ashley felt everything crumble around her. "Do you have something to say to my son?" Stephen's question was like a knife straight to Ashley's heart. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Everything she had done to Nathan, the contempt, the mocking, the delay in service, had been exposed right before the restaurant owner's eyes. There was no way out. Nathan remained silent. But he didn't need to say a word. His father would handle everything, and Ashley knew that tonight would not end the way she had hoped. Ashley stood frozen in place, feeling as though her legs could no longer lift. She could feel the cold running down her spine every second that passed, adding to the suffocating tension. Stephen Carter looked at her, his gaze sharp, piercing straight into her soul. "Do you have anything to say to my son?" His voice was neither loud nor angry, but the weight of each word forced everyone in the restaurant to stop what they were doing. Ashley took a shaky breath, her lips pressing tightly together. She wanted to say something to make excuses, but no words could change the truth. She had misjudged him. She had believed Nathan was just an unworthy boy, someone who didn't belong in the world of Lumiere. But it turned out this boy had more power than any other guest in the restaurant tonight. She wanted to turn away to escape Stephen's gaze, but her feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. Another voice broke the oppressive silence. "Ashley!" She jumped, turning around to meet the stern look of the restaurant manager. "Which customer do you think deserves respect?" The question cut straight to the heart of the matter, leaving no room for her to escape. Ashley swallowed, her eyes darting around. The other guests in the restaurant were watching her, some with astonishment, others with scrutiny. A few whispered to one another, while others simply waited for her response. A wave of panic rose in her throat. Stephen Carter took a step closer, leaving Ashley with almost no way to retreat. Kindness is not a choice, it is a standard. His words were simple, but they sounded like a verdict. Lumiere wasn't just a luxury restaurant. It was a place where all customers deserved equal respect. Ashley felt her chest tighten. She had made a grave mistake all this time. She had believed her power lay in controlling the customers, deciding who was important and who should be ignored, but today she realized that control was nothing but an illusion. The restaurant owner stood right in front of her, and the person she had intentionally looked down on turned out to be his son. A silent tear fell, but she quickly wiped it away, not wanting to show weakness in front of all the eyes watching her. I'm sorry." The words came out so quietly that they almost drowned in the air. But was the apology still meaningful when the consequences were already so clear? Stephen didn't respond. Immediately, he looked at her as if evaluating whether she was truly remorseful or simply trying to protect her job. Henry Thompson, who had been observing everything from the beginning, gently swirled his wine glass, giving a faint, amused smile. An apology is never enough when someone says it just to save themselves. His words were soft yet sharp. Cutting through the tense atmosphere, Ashley clenched her fists, unsure of what to do next. Nathan, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his voice devoid of any bitterness. "You don't need to apologize." The entire restaurant fell silent, and you could hear the faint clinking of cutlery from a table far away. Nathan looked directly at Ashley, his eyes carrying no anger, just a quiet sense of disappointment. "I just hope you'll remember this." Ashley bit her lip, frozen in place. His words struck at her pride. No shouting, no harsh punishment, just one simple sentence that made her feel more ashamed than anything else. Stephen slowly exhaled, his gaze still cold, but gradually softening Ashley. "I think it's time for you to reassess how you work here." Those words were not just a remarque, but a warning. She knew that from now on things would never be the same. Lumiere closed later than usual tonight. There were no more elegant guests sipping wine beneath the crystal chandeliers. No more clinking of knives and forks against expensive porcelain plates. No more polite conversations echoing between the powerful people of Beverly Hills. The restaurant sank into a tense stillness. Now a peaceful quiet, but a heavy invisible pressure. All the staff were called into the meeting room, where important meetings usually took place, but never had the atmosphere been so stifling. As it was tonight, they stood in line, no one daring to speak. Their eyes furtively observing the boss sitting at the head of the table, elbows resting on the polished wood. His calm face exuding authority. Shlee sat at the back of the room, her back pressed against the chair as if she wanted to shrink away. Her hands were tightly clasped together, her fingers clenched so hard they turned white. She was no longer the confident woman. The one who walked through the restaurant as if she were a queen. Now she was just an employee who had made a mistake waiting for her judgment. Stephen didn't speak right away. He silently observed each face in the room, as if considering evaluating some staff avoided his gaze. While others stood rigid tense, waiting for the words to come finally, he spoke. His voice was deep, not loud, but enough for each person in the room to feel the weight of every word. "We all make mistakes, but what matters is what we learn from them." No one reacted. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Ashley felt a chill run down her spine. Stephen lifted his head, his cold gaze sweeping the room, stopping exactly when he looked at Ashley. "Ashley, do you understand where your mistake lies?" The whole room suddenly felt like it stopped breathing. All eyes were on Ashley, some staff holding their breath, others silently watching. Ashley felt her throat go dry, but there was no escaping. She had to answer? Answer. She swallowed hard, trying to stay calm, but her voice trembled when it came out. I judged a customer based on his appearance. Is your mistake really that simple? Stephen asked again, his tone still calm, but carrying an invisible pressure. Ashley felt her chest tighten. I looked down on that boy. I didn't serve him the way I served the other guests, so you know exactly what you did. Stephen nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her. My next question is why Ashley froze. Why she knew the answer, but saying it in front of everyone. It felt like a confession. Her lips trembled, but Stephen didn't give her time to avoid the question. You looked at someone and decided he didn't deserve to be treated kindly. Why Ashley felt every breath in the room seemed to compress. She couldn't avoid it anymore. She bit her lip, then sighed. Because I thought that boy wasn't suited for this restaurant. As soon as the words left her mouth, the room fell into silence. Ashley didn't defend herself, didn't blame anyone else. She knew she had no right to do that. Stephen continued to stare at her, not judging, not angry, but his gaze was sharp as a warning. Do you know that goes against everything Lumiere stands for? Ashley bit her lip, lowering her head even more. I know. Stephen nodded softly. Good. Because if you didn't realize that I wouldn't need to waste my time here. His words were cold and sharp, like a blade causing some of the staff in the room to instinctively swallow. Ashley felt more ashamed than ever before. She had always prided herself on her ability to read customers, confident in her judgment. But tonight she was wrong. Not just wrong with an ordinary guest, but wrong with the boss's son and wrong with herself. Stephen took a slow breath, then looked around the room. I hope you all realize that this is not just a personal mistake. This is a systemic issue, a culture that I do not accept at Lumiere. No one in this restaurant has the right to decide who deserves respect and who doesn't. Kindness is not a choice. It's a standard. Ashley lowered her head, a tear silently falling onto her hand. She didn't know whether she would lose her job, Jay, or not. But she knew one thing for sure. She had lost the confidence, the arrogance she once had. No one said anything. No one defended her because no one could deny that she was wrong. Stephen stood up, preparing to leave the room. But before walking out the door, he turned around and looked straight at Ashley for the last time. Do you want to change? Ashley lifted her head, her eyes are. She knew the only answer that could save her. She swallowed hard, then nodded. I do. Stephen didn't nod right away. He looked at her for a long moment, as if evaluating whether her answer was truly sincere. Then he said only one sentence. Prove it. And he left the room. Ashley sat there with a feeling she had never experienced before. Not fear of losing her job, but the fear of realizing that throughout her life she had always lived the wrong way. The atmosphere in the meeting room grew thick as if an invisible pressure weighed heavily on every employee. The silence stretched to the point where the ticking of the wall clock could be heard each second. Passing slowly. No one dared to breathe loudly. No one dared to take their eyes off the man sitting at the center. Stephen Carr leaned back in his chair, his gaze calm but carrying an undeniable weight, as though he could see through each person through the thoughts they dared not admit. Ashley sat at the back of the room. Her head lowered, her hands tightly clasped together on her lap, as if it was the only way to keep herself from trembling. She felt the gaze of everyone in the room directed at her, as if she were a student called to the front of the class with no answer. Prepared for the first time in her career, she felt small, as though she no longer had control over anything. Gone was the usual confidence, the arrogance she had always believed was the key to her survival in this lavish and ruthless environment. All that was left was a harsh, undeniable truth. She was wrong, and worse. She couldn't justify her mistake, Stevens. Sharp gaze remained fixed at as he spoke, his voice steady, but every word carrying an undeniable weight. Ashley, do you understand where your mistake lies? She swallowed hard, her voice shaking with an unmasked tremor. I was wrong. I judged the boy just because of his appearance. No one spoke, but it was clear that everyone was listening. The other employees stood still, some bowing their heads to avoid Stephen's gaze, others nodding silently, as if they too recognized their own faults in Ashley's behavior. Ashley took a deep breath, but her throat was dry. She knew she couldn't stop at that one sentence. If she truly wanted to make amends, if she truly wanted to salvage any shred of dignity left, she had to speak up, because I was too focused on the luxurious image of the restaurant and forgot the most important thing, our customers, our people. The confession echoed in the room, uninterrupted, unbroken, leaving behind a weight that hung over everyone. Some employees nodded, subtly. Others looked down their eyes, reflecting regret for having remained silent when they witnessed the event unfold. None of them were directly at fault like Ashley, but no one could deny that they had seen what happened, understood it was wrong, and yet chose not to intervene. Stephen nodded slowly, his gaze neither angry nor accusing, but there was no comfort in his eyes either. Do you think your mistake only affected the boy? Ashley bit her lip, her mind empty. She wanted to find an answer to say something that could ease the situation, but the truth was she had nothing to say. Stephen didn't wait for her response. It affects the entire reputation of this restaurant. No one in the room moved. His words were like a sharp knife cutting through the heavy atmosphere. Lumiere was not just a luxurious restaurant. It was a brand, a symbol of perfection, a place where customers came not only to enjoy fine dining, but to experience service that matched the price they paid. But what would happen if one day customers realized they were being judged the moment they walked in? That the staff here didn't serve with respect but with scrutinizing eyes? Ashley felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had never thought about it. She had always believed she was doing the best for Lumiere, that she was maintaining the restaurant's high standards by serving only those she deemed worthy. But now she realized that it was that very mindset that had destroyed everything. Stephen looked around the room, then continued. His voice was not loud, but every word etched itself into the minds of everyone present. The people here today have not only learned a lesson about service, but about how to be human. No one could argue. No one could deny. Lumiere does not just serve fine food. We serve respect. A simple statement, but one that carried more weight than any reprimand. Ashley lowered her head, a tear silently falling onto the back of her hand. Not because she feared losing her job, not because she felt humiliated in front of her colleagues, but because for the first time she truly saw her own mistake. Not a mistake in her work, but in how she viewed people, in how she had spent her life judging others, without realizing that she too could be judged in return. No one said a word. No one dared to break the heavy silence. Everyone understood that tonight was not just a regular meeting. Tonight, Lumiere not only lost its perfect image, but also the trust it had built over the years. Ashley didn't know if she could fix her mistake. She only knew one thing for sure. From this moment forward, she could no longer be the same person. Lumiere did not just serve the rich Lumiere served people, and she had forgotten that the room remained enveloped in a heavy, silent atmosphere so intense that it almost seemed you could hear the heartbeat of each person standing there. The employees still hadn't dared to move their eyes quietly, observing Ashley, who was now almost bent over, her hands tightly clasped together on her lap, as if they were the last support, keeping her from completely collapsing. In the past, Ashley had always prided herself on being one of the best employees at Lumiere, believing she could control everything within her grasp and that no one could shake her confidence. But at this moment, all of that had crumbled. She knew she had no right to make excuses, knowing that the mistake she had made wasn't just a moment of thoughtlessness, but a flawed mindset she had maintained for far too long. Yet even so, she didn't want to let go, didn't want to accept that this was the end of everything she had worked so hard to build. Taking a deep breath, Ashley bit her lip to hold back the sobs, then slowly lifted her head, her eyes brimming with tears, but her gaze firmer than ever, before her voice caught in her throat as she spoke. But this time there was no arrogance, no trace of the self-satisfaction she had once always shown. I don't expect to be forgiven immediately, but please give me a chance to prove I can. Change the room became so quiet that you could hear the soft breaths of some of the employees. No one knew how Stephen Carter would react. They had seen him be very strict with employees, but never in a situation like this one, where he wasn't just dealing with a personal mistake, but a problem that affected the reputation and core values that Lumiere had built over the years. Stephen remained calm, but his sharp eyes never left Ashley. He watched her intently, as if searching for something in her gaze. Sincerity. A real desire to change. Or just a plea born from the fear of losing the job she had been so attached to. No one knew what he was thinking, but no one dared to interrupt the silence. Finally, he nodded slowly. I believe everyone deserves a chance to correct their mistakes. His words came slowly but with weight. Not just an acceptance, but a reminder that no one is born perfect, that mistakes are part of being human, but what matters is how they choose to face them and change. Ashley took a shaky breath, feeling like there was a flicker of light in the thick darkness that had surrounded her all evening. But immediately Stephen continued, his voice not losing its sternness, but change doesn't come from words, it comes from actions. Ashley held her breath, the whole room still silent. Stephen stood up slowly, his hands clasped, as he looked directly at her. His gaze no longer just reprimanding, but also scrutinizing. You have 1 month for this trial. Ashley blinked, stunned to the point where she couldn't believe her ears. If you don't prove the change, you will no longer be a part of Lumiere. The entire room seemed to freeze for a moment. Then, some employees exhaled quietly, unsure whether it was from the tension or from the relief of seeing their boss not make an immediately harsh decision. But even so, everyone understood that this was not an easy opportunity for forgiveness, but a real challenge. Ashley couldn't speak. She had thought she might be fired that very night, that there was no way to undo the mistake she had made, but Stephen Carter didn't choose that path. He had given her a chance. But it wasn't out of pity. It came from a belief that people can change, but only if they truly want to and are truly willing to put in the effort to do so. Ashley bowed her head, her eyes red from emotion. But this time, the tears weren't from fear or shame, but from someone who had just been given the chance to start over. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice and not let it shake as she replied, I understand, and I will prove that Stephen didn't nod. Immediately, he continued to look at her for a long while, as if making sure that these words weren't just a hollow promise uttered in panic. Then finally he turned and walked out of the room without saying another word. Ashley sat still in her chair, her back straight, but her hands still tightly clasped together, feeling as if she had just survived a great storm. The room retained its tense atmosphere, but this time, the tension wasn't just about the fear of a consequence. It was the anticipation of whether Ashley would truly change. No one knew the answer. Only she could decide that the meeting room gradually fell silent after Stephen left with the employees dispersing, each carrying their own thoughts about what had just happened. Ashley remained seated, her face thoughtful, while the others exchanged hesitant glances before leaving. Stephen walked slowly toward his office, his broad shoulders exuding authority, yet there was no sign of anger. He was used to awkward situations, having witnessed many mistakes, but for him, what mattered was not pointing out the error, but seeing how people would correct it. Nathan silently followed behind, saying nothing. He was still thinking about everything the way his father handled the issue, how people reacted, and what he himself had done that evening entering the office. Stephen pulled out the chair and sat down, gently massaging his temple, a habit whenever he had to deal with a difficult problem. Nathan sat slowly across from him, his gaze full of contemplation. "You're not angry." Nathan's voice lowered, tinged with doubt. "If it were me, I'd probably be really angry." Stephen looked at his son, a faint smile appearing on his usually stern face. His eyes softened, but he maintained his expression. "Anger doesn't teach anyone a lesson, son," he said slowly, "but patience and compassion can." Nathan sat quietly, letting his father's words sink into his mind. He had never seen his father lose his composure, never heard him raise his voice, whether at home or at work. But tonight, Nathan realized that his father's calmness wasn't because he didn't care or wasn't angry, but because he chose to control it, to turn it into a lesson rather than a confrontation. "So what about Ashley, Nathan?" asked slowly. "Do you think she can change?" Stephen looked at his son, a thoughtful glint passing through his eyes before he answered. "I don't know," he said frankly, "but I believe everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. Mistakes don't define a person. How they correct them is what matters." Nathan nodded, though he wasn't entirely satisfied with that answer. He looked down at the table, his hands intertwined, then absent-mindedly asked something that had been on his mind all evening. "Are you proud that I didn't react?" Stephen paused for a moment, his gaze softening before he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm very proud, Nathan," he said, his voice slow but firm. "Do you know why you stayed there unreactive even though you were disrespected?" Nathan thought for a few seconds, then nodded, slightly. "Because I know I don't need to prove anything." A small smile crept onto Stephen's lips. "Exactly. Your value doesn't lie in the way others see you, but in the way you see yourself." Nathan looked at his father for the first time, truly understanding the meaning behind the lessons he had been taught. He had grown up in a family where his father never measured anyone's worth based on how much money they had or what clothes they wore, but by how they acted, how they treated others. He wasn't angry at being disrespected by Ashley, not because he didn't feel anything, but because he knew it didn't change who he was. Her judgment had no value to him because he knew exactly who he was. Stephen gently patted his son's shoulder before standing up. "But remember this. Nathan, calmness doesn't mean silence forever when necessary. You still have to speak up, but speaking up isn't about anger. It's about integrity." "Nathan," looked up, his eyes lighting up with a newfound understanding. "Tonight, you did the right thing," Stephen continued. "You did. Let anger control you. But in the future, there will be times when you'll need to stand up. Not to protect yourself, but to protect others." The 14-year-old boy looked at his father for a long time, then slowly nodded. He knew that the most important lesson of the night wasn't just about patience. It was about responsibility. In the days following that fateful meeting, Lumiere continued to operate as usual with its Ian lavishness and the same luxurious guests visiting every night. But for Ashley, everything had changed. She could no longer go back to working the way she used to, unable to continue viewing customers through a lens of discrimination as she had before the conversation with Stephen Carter, the looks from her colleagues, and above all, Nathan's calm demeanor that night. All of it felt like a mirror reflecting the person she once was, a person she no longer wanted to be. She wasn't sure if she could completely change overnight, but she knew where to begin. In the following days, Ashley tried to correct her mistakes. She no longer judged customers based on their appearance, whether it was a businessman in a sharp suit or a customer in casual clothes. She treated them all with the same courteous attitude when a middle-aged man walked into the restaurant wearing an old shirt and worn-out leather shoes. Ashley no longer showed any signs of disdain. Instead, she gently smiled and greeted him. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to choose a table, or can I suggest a nice spot for you?" The man looked slightly surprised, as if he was used to the judgmental stares whenever he entered places like this. But then he nodded, his face softening a little. Ashley led him to a table near the window, where the light from the chandelier reflected on the shiny wooden table, not some hidden corner near the kitchen, as she had done before she handed him the menu with the utmost politeness, with no hint of sarcasm. No sign of contempt. These changes weren't easy, and Ashley knew she couldn't expect everyone to immediately believe she had changed one evening, as she was busy setting a table for a new group of guests, a longtime colleague. Linda approached her, arms crossed and eyes scrutinizing her. "Have you really changed?" Linda asked in a lowered voice, as if she didn't believe what she had been seeing over the past few days. Ashley paused for a moment, then slowly set down the crystal glass on the table. She looked Linda straight in the eye, not avoiding it, not hiding the seriousness in her gaze. "Not just to keep my job," she replied, her voice calmer than she expected, "but because I've realized what's most important." Linda squinted seemingly, trying to assess whether Ashley was telling the truth. She had once known a proud Ashley, someone who never bowed her head, someone who always believed she was right. But the person standing before her was no longer that person. "Is that?" So Linda said slightly, curling her lip, her voice no longer mocking but genuinely inquisitive. Ashley just smiled faintly, not needing to explain further. She knew she didn't have to prove anything to anyone other than herself. She went back to her work, continuing to serve customers with an attitude she had never had before, a genuinely sincere attitude, not from the rigid rules she once believed were Lumiere's standards. Because for the first time in her life, Ashley wasn't serving for the restaurant's reputation. She was serving because she understood the value of respect. A week has passed since that fateful night, since the moment when Lumiere became not just an upscale restaurant, but also a vivid lesson in respect and how people treat each other. Over the past 7 days, Ashley has changed, not a change on the outside. Not because she feared losing her job, but a real change that came from within. She learned that status or appearance cannot define a person's worth, and tonight, as the doors of Lumiere open once more, Ashley knows that this is the most important moment to prove her change. Nathan walks in with his father. The boy is no longer wearing the gray hoodie from before, but still maintains the same calm and confident demeanor. Ashley SP him immediately. But this time, instead of a probing gaze or suspicion, she simply smiles. Not the forced smile of someone trying to appear professional, but a genuine smile that comes from the heart. She walks over, standing tall, her voice soft but without the distance that was there before. "Hello, Nathan. What would you like to eat today?" Nathan looks at her for a moment as if assessing whether this change is truly real, but when he looks into Ashley's eyes, he realizes this isn't a performance, not a fake attempt to win back trust. He smiles a smile that carries no challenge or teasing, but recognition. "Can you suggest the best dish?" Ashley is momentarily surprised, then laughs softly. A laugh that no longer carries the forced or sharp tone of the past. Of course, she flips through the menu not to check prices or consider who deserves what dish, but genuinely wanting to pick out the one that suits Nathan best. She is no longer the Ashley from before. A little behind her, Stephen Carter observes everything. He doesn't speak immediately, only silently watches the conversation between his son and Ashley. He notices every detail, the way Ashley no longer appears rigid or arrogant, the way she genuinely listens and cares for the customer, rather than judging them based on appearance. Then, as Ashley turns to prepare the order, Stephen slowly nods. "Good job, Ashley. I believe you're on the right track." The simple words carry a heavy weight. Ashley freezes for a moment as if not believing her ears, but when she looks up and sees Stephen's gaze, she knows that this isn't just a polite encouragement. Stephen has truly acknowledged her change. She bows her head, her voice no longer carrying the arrogance of the past, only sincere gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I'll keep trying. No one in the restaurant knows everything that has happened over the past week. No one can feel the full process of Ashley's transformation. But for her, this moment is proof that she truly has a second chance, a chance to become a better person, and this time, she won't waste it. Loamy air still shimmered under the warm yellow lights. The elegant guests continued to come and go, and soft conversations echoed in the lavish space of the restaurant. But for Nathan, the most important moment of tonight was not the luxurious dishes or the admiring glances toward his father, but the real change he had just witnessed, the change of a person, of a mindset, of a perspective that had once been wrong. Ashley had made a mistake, but she had learned how to correct it. That made him realize that no one is perfect from the start, but all of us can become better if we choose to. As father and son stepped out of the restaurant, the cool Beverly Hills night air was filled with the glow of bright neon signs, the sound of passing cars, the hurried footsteps of people walking on the marble-paved sidewalks, all blended together, creating a lively yet thoughtful scene. Nathan walked alongside his father, his eyes filled with unspoken thoughts. He had grown up with his father's lessons, but tonight he truly understood one thing. "Do you think we can change? Everyone?" he suddenly asked, his voice not filled with doubt, but with deep curiosity. Stephen paused for a moment, looked at his son, and smiled gently. A smile from someone who had seen through many things in life. His expression was no longer the stern one he wore during meetings, but more distant, as if he were seeing something beyond the scene before him. "No," he said slowly, "but we can start with one person." Nathan fell silent, but he felt his heart slowed down and the thoughts in his mind became clearer. Change is not something that can be forced, nor something that happens instantly. But if we can change one person, then one day the whole world could be a better place. He smiled, feeling that tonight wasn't just a lesson for Ashley, but also for him. He looked back at Lumiere, where the light still shone brightly, where people were still enjoying their dinner, and where a woman once full of arrogance was now learning to bow her head, to listen and understand. As they walked down the street, the sparkling lights of Beverly Hills reflected in Nathan's eyes. He knew that the most important lesson wasn't just about discrimination or status, but about how we treat each other in a world where you can be anyone. Choose to be kind with that thought. Nathan continued walking with his father, blending into the bustling crowd, carrying a lesson in his heart that he would never forget. Today's story wasn't just about a boy entering a fancy restaurant or an employee making a mistake. It was the story of respect, tolerance, and the ability to change. We've all likely judged others based on their appearance, but what matters is not that we were wrong, but whether we're willing to correct our mistakes. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a situation where someone was judged unfairly just because of their appearance or circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to share the video to spread this meaningful message, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next human stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.